The rain fell in sheets, transforming the city streets into glistening rivers beneath the streetlights. I hunched my shoulders against the downpour, cursing myself for forgetting my umbrella yet again. My scrubs were already soaked through, clinging uncomfortably to my skin after a grueling 12-hour shift at Mercy General. 3 blocks to my apartment, just 3 more blocks of misery before I could peel off these wet clothes, fall into my lumpy mattress, and forget about the parade of broken bodies that had streamed through the emergency room doors today. The screech of tires cut through the drumming rain, followed by the sickening crunch of metal striking concrete. I froze, my nursing instincts immediately overriding my exhaustion. The sound had come from around the corner, no more than 100 feet away. Without thinking, I ran toward it, my sneakers splashing through puddles that soaked my already drenched scrub pants. I rounded the corner and saw it. A motorcycle crumpled against a guardrail, its front wheel twisted at an impossible angle. A few yards away lay a body, motionless on the glistening asphalt. No one else was around. The rain and late hour had cleared the streets of potential witnesses. "Hey!" I called out, rushing to the fallen rider. "Can you hear me?" No response. As I drew closer, I could see it was a man, his powerful frame splayed awkwardly where he'd been thrown from the bike. His helmet had a crack running from temple to crown, and blood mixed with rain beneath his head, spreading in pink-tinged rivulets across the pavement. I knelt beside him, my training taking over. First, check the airway. I carefully removed his helmet, supporting his neck to minimize movement. Despite the blood and dirt smearing his face, there was no denying his striking features. Strong jaw darkened with stubble, high cheekbones, full lips now pale and tight with pain. His leather jacket had been torn open at the shoulder, revealing a torso mapped with tattoos beneath the crimson stains spreading across his skin. "Sir, can you hear me?" I pressed my fingers to his neck, finding a pulse. Weak and thready, but there. "I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you. Stay with me." I pulled my phone from my pocket with trembling fingers, dialing 911 as I continued my assessment. Probable concussion, possible internal bleeding, suspected fracture to the right leg given its unnatural angle. He was in bad shape, but still breathing. 911, what's your emergency? "I need an ambulance at the corner of Maple and 4th Street, I said quickly. "Motorcycle accident, adult male, unconscious with head trauma, possible internal injuries. I'm a nurse at Mercy General. Patient needs immediate transport. Ambulance is being dispatched. ETA 8 minutes. Are you in a safe location?" "Yes, but hurry. He's losing a lot of blood." I hung up and returned my full attention to the injured man. The rain was still coming down in torrents, washing away blood as quickly as it seeped from his wounds. Hypothermia would soon become as dangerous as his injuries if I couldn't get him out of the deluge. I shrugged off my thin jacket, the only protection I had against the rain, and draped it over his chest. Then I leaned close, using my body to shield his face from the downpour. "Hang in there," I murmured, pushing soaked hair from his forehead. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." His eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing eyes of the most intense amber I'd ever seen. They focused on me with surprising clarity given his condition. "An angel," he rasped, his voice accented. "Russian, maybe?" "Not quite," I replied, relief flooding me that he was conscious. "I'm Anna. I'm a nurse. You've been in an accident, but an ambulance is on the way." He tried to move, then winced. "My leg." "Don't move," I instructed, placing a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. "Your leg is injured, possibly broken. You might have internal injuries too." His eyes never left my face, studying me with an intensity that seemed at odds with his condition. "You're soaking wet," he observed. I almost laughed at the absurdity of his concern. "I'm fine. Saving your life is more important than staying dry." Something flickered in his amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper I couldn't identify. His hand moved with startling speed, gripping my wrist with unexpected strength. "Remember this moment," he said, his voice suddenly clear and commanding despite his injuries. "Remember that you saved me." Before I could respond, his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness again. I checked his pulse, still there, but weaker. Where was that ambulance? In the distance, I finally heard sirens. I waved my phone's flashlight to guide them to our location, staying by the stranger's side. One hand keeping pressure on a particularly nasty gash on his arm, the other still captured in his grip, even in unconsciousness. The ambulance arrived in a splash of lights that turned the raindrops to rubies and sapphires. Paramedics jumped out, equipment in hand. "What have we got?" one asked as they reached us. "Male, 30s, motorcycle versus guardrail," I reported, falling into professional terminology. "Unconscious, but was briefly responsive, pupils equal and reactive when I checked. Probable concussion, suspected fracture to the right femur, multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding." The paramedic gave me an appreciative nod as his partner prepared a backboard. "You medical?" "Nurse at Mercy General. Just finished my shift when I heard the crash." "Lucky for him," the paramedic remarked as they worked to stabilize the stranger. "Want to ride along? We're heading to your hospital anyway." I hesitated, glancing at the unconscious man whose hand I had to gently pry from my wrist. Something about him pulled at me in ways I couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the vulnerability of his unconscious state, so at odds with the powerful body now rendered helpless. Or perhaps it was simply that I needed to believe I could still save someone, after losing 3 patients in the past week alone. "Yes," I decided. "I'll come." The next few hours passed in a blur of focused intensity. The man, who carried no identification, had internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. His femur was indeed fractured, along with 3 ribs and his right wrist, but it was the head injury that concerned us most. A subdural hematoma required immediate intervention. I don't know why I stayed through his surgery, watching from the observation area above the operating room despite being off duty. I should have gone home, dried off, slept. Instead, I found myself hovering, waiting for news, changing into dry scrubs a colleague loaned me. Dawn was breaking when he was moved to recovery. I slipped in, technically no longer on duty but still wearing my hospital badge. The bruises were beginning to bloom in purple and blue against his tanned skin. I checked his vitals, satisfied with the improvement, then gently adjusted his IV. As I turned to leave, his hand shot out with startling speed and gripped my wrist. I gasped, heart leaping into my throat as I met his eyes. Open now, and alert despite the pain medication. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, graveled with pain and something else. Authority. "You're at Mercy General. You were in a motorcycle accident," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite his grip, which bordered on painful. "I'm Anna, the nurse who found you on the street." His eyes narrowed slightly as they scanned my face, seemingly cataloging every feature. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. His thumb brushed across my pulse point, sending an involuntary shiver up my arm. "Anna," he repeated, as if tasting my name. "You saved me, in the rain." "I just happened to be there," I said, surprised he remembered anything from before the hospital. "No," he said with unexpected firmness. "It was more than that." His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You protected me with your own body. You gave me your coat." I swallowed, unsettled by his perfect recall of those moments. "You should rest," I said, gently extracting my wrist from his grip. "You've been through major surgery." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "What's your last name, Anna?" "Sullivan," I answered automatically, then frowned. "But that's not important right now. You need—" "It's important to me," he interrupted. "Anna Sullivan." He said it like he was committing it to memory. "I'm Nikolai. Just Nikolai. No last name offered. Well, Nikolai, you need to rest now. I'll check on you later." As I moved toward the door, his voice stopped me. "You're not on duty now, are you?" I turned back, surprised by his perception. "No. My shift ended before I found you on the street. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." That ghost of a smile again, stronger now. As I said, more than coincidence. I left the room feeling strangely unsettled. Over the next 3 days, I found myself gravitating toward Nikolai's room during my shifts, and even stopping by on my way to or from work. His recovery was remarkable. Miraculous, Dr. Sharma had called it. The head injury that should have left lasting damage seemed to be healing at an accelerated rate. His strength returned visibly with each passing day, and with it came an undeniable presence that seemed to transform the sterile hospital room into something else entirely. When I entered, his attention would fix on me immediately, regardless of what he was doing. He asked questions about my shift, my background, my life, with an intensity that should have felt invasive, but somehow didn't. What was more unnerving was how little he spoke about himself. Any personal questions I asked were deflected with practiced ease or answered so vaguely they revealed nothing at all. The only constant was his unwavering focus on me. It was as though I had become the center of his universe, and the sensation was as intoxicating as it was disconcerting. On the fourth day, I arrived for my shift to find a commotion at the nurses' station. 2 men in expensive suits were speaking with the hospital administrator, their postures radiating tense authority. Near the elevator stood 2 more men, built like linebackers, wearing dark clothes and inscrutable expressions. "What's going on?" I asked Marge, who was watching the scene with undisguised interest. "Apparently, our mystery motorcycle guy is somebody important," she whispered. "Those suits have been throwing around words like private security and confidentiality agreements. They've been asking for the nurse who found him at the accident scene." My stomach tightened. "That would be me." Marge raised an eyebrow. "Well, honey, looks like you're about to find out who your patient really is." Before I could respond, the hospital administrator spotted me and waved me over. As I approached, I felt the weight of the suited men's appraisal, cold and calculating. "Ms. Sullivan, these gentlemen would like to speak with you about the patient in room 412, the administrator said, her professionally pleasant expression not quite masking her unease. The taller of the 2 men extended his hand. "Ms. Sullivan, I'm Mr. Volkov's head of security. We understand you were the first to assist him after his accident and have been overseeing his care. Volkov. Finally, a last name." "I found him at the scene, yes," I said carefully, "and I've been checking in on him. Mr. Volkov speaks highly of you," the man continued. "He's requested that you accompany him during his transfer to his private medical facility this afternoon." I blinked. "Transfer? He's still recovering from major trauma. He shouldn't be moved yet." The second man smiled thinly. "The decision has been made. Mr. Volkov's personal medical team will take over his care. You're requested to assist with the transition, to ensure his comfort." There was something in his tone that made it clear this wasn't actually a request. "I need to speak with my patient directly," I said, moving past them toward Nikolai's room. When I entered, Nikolai was sitting on the edge of the bed, no longer in a hospital gown, but dressed in black pants and a button-down shirt that had certainly not come from the hospital. His bruises had faded to yellowish shadows, and despite the cast on his wrist and leg, he emanated a coiled energy that made the room feel smaller. "You're leaving," I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Nikolai looked up, and that now familiar intensity fixed on me. "We're leaving," he corrected. "I don't understand. You can't just... Who are those men? Who are you?" He stood, moving with a fluid grace that belied his injuries. "Those men work for me. As for who I am," he took a step closer. "I'm someone who repays his debts. Anna Sullivan." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I told you. I was just doing what anyone would do. You don't owe me anything. You saved my life," he said simply. "When others would have passed by in the rain, you stopped. You shielded me with your own body. You stayed with me through surgery." His eyes burned into mine. "And now I find myself unwilling to leave you behind." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not entirely unpleasant, but warning nonetheless. "I can't just leave with you. I have a job, responsibilities, all taken care of," he interrupted smoothly. "Your hospital has agreed to a temporary leave of absence. Generously compensated, of course." Anger flashed through me. "You can't just decide this for me. You don't even know me." Something darkened in his amber eyes. "I know enough. I know you work too hard for too little recognition. I know you live alone in an apartment with security so poor it's practically an invitation. I know you haven't taken a vacation in over 2 years." He took another step closer, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made my senses swim. "And I know that you feel it too. This connection between us. My mouth went dry. How could he possibly know those details about my life? "This is crazy," I whispered. "Perhaps," he conceded with that ghost of a smile. "But I've made my decision, Anna. The only question is whether you'll come willingly or if this needs to be more complicated." The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice stronger than I felt. He reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. "I'm offering you an opportunity. 2 weeks at my private residence while I recover. You'll be well compensated, far better than this place pays you. Consider it a vacation. After that, if you wish to return to this..." His gesture encompassed the hospital room, the life I'd built. "You may do so. And if I refuse?" His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I would be disappointed, and I don't handle disappointment well, Anna." I should have been terrified. I should have run from the room, screamed for security, done anything but stand there considering his proposition. But something in me, something I hadn't known existed until Nikolai's amber eyes had locked on mine that rainy night, wavered and bent toward him like a flower seeking the sun. 2 weeks, I said finally, "and then I come back. No questions asked?" His smile bloomed fully then, transforming his face into something so beautiful it almost hurt to look at him. "You have my word." What I didn't realize then, as I nodded my agreement to this stranger's impossible request, was that Nikolai Volkov's word was both unbreakable and infinitely dangerous. I didn't understand that by saving his life on that rain-slicked street, I had irrevocably entangled mine with a man who collected debts and loyalties with the same ruthless precision with which he eliminated obstacles. I couldn't have known that the moment I stepped into his world, the door would lock behind me. All I knew was the inexplicable pull I felt toward him, like gravity shifting its center. And that when his security detail ushered us from the hospital an hour later, his arm possessively around my waist, supporting his weight, but also holding me firmly at his side, I felt both a thrill of anticipation and a whisper of warning. The black SUV waiting at the curb had tinted windows so dark they reflected my pale, uncertain face back at me. Nikolai's hand pressed against the small of my back, guiding me forward. "After you, Anna Sullivan," he murmured close to my ear. "Your new life awaits." As I climbed into the vehicle, I had no way of knowing just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The SUV glided through the city streets like a shark through dark water. Tinted windows separated us from the outside world, creating an intimate bubble of leather and luxury. Nikolai sat beside me, his large frame taking up more space than seemed physically possible. Despite his injuries, he exuded a controlled power that made the spacious vehicle feel suddenly confining. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between us since leaving the hospital. Nikolai's eyes shifted to me, their amber depths unreadable. "My home outside the city. It's about an hour's drive. And what am I supposed to do there? You mentioned a private medical team, so you don't actually need a nurse." The corner of his mouth lifted in that now familiar ghost of a smile. "Consider yourself my personal care attendant." Something in the way he said it made heat bloom across my skin. "I don't even have any clothes," I protested weakly. The scrubs I wore were borrowed from the hospital after my own clothes had been soaked through in the rain while saving him. "I need to stop by my apartment. Everything you need will be provided," he replied, dismissing my concern with a slight wave of his hand. His eyes met mine, and his voice softened. "I take care of what's mine, Anna." The possessive statement should have outraged me. Instead, it sent a forbidden thrill down my spine that I tried desperately to ignore. As the city fell away, replaced by rolling countryside, I stole glances at my captor, because despite his talk of opportunities and choices, that's what he was. In profile, his features were even more striking: the strong line of his jaw, the aristocratic nose, the long lashes that shadowed his cheekbones. Beneath the expensive clothing, I knew, lay a body marked not just by the recent accident but by older scars I'd glimpsed during those first frantic moments on the rainy street. This was a man who had seen violence, who perhaps dealt in it regularly. What had I gotten myself into? The SUV eventually turned onto a private road that wound through dense woods for several minutes before emerging before wrought iron gates at least 12 feet high. Security cameras pivoted to track our approach. The gates swung open silently, and we continued up a winding driveway flanked by meticulously maintained gardens. When the mansion came into view, I couldn't suppress a gasp. Sprawling across a gentle hill, the stone structure looked like something transplanted from European aristocracy, with its multiple wings, turrets, and expansive terraces. "This is yours?" I whispered. "One of my residences," Nikolai replied, watching my reaction with evident satisfaction. The SUV stopped at the front entrance, where a line of staff waited on the steps. As a man in a suit opened my door, I was struck by the choreography of it all, the practiced movements, the deference in lowered eyes, the absolute silence. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. Nikolai insisted on walking into the house despite his injuries, his hand at the small of my back again, guiding and possessing. The entrance hall soared 3 stories high, with a crystal chandelier casting prismatic light across marble floors. "Ms. Sullivan will be staying in the east wing, adjacent to my quarters," Nikolai instructed a severe-looking woman who I assumed was some kind of housekeeper. "Ensure her room is prepared, and bring up a selection of appropriate clothing and personal items." "Yes, Mr. Volkov." "Will you be dining in your study this evening?" Nikolai's eyes never left my face. "No. We'll dine on the terrace at 8. Inform the chef we'll require his spring menu." The woman nodded and disappeared without another word. "Come," Nikolai said, taking my elbow. "You look exhausted. Let me show you to your room so you can rest before dinner." We ascended a sweeping staircase, Nikolai moving more slowly due to his injured leg, but refusing any assistance from the staff who hovered nearby. I noticed security personnel stationed discreetly at various points throughout the house, their alert gazes tracking our progress. The east wing was a labyrinth of corridors adorned with artwork that even my untrained eye recognized as priceless. Nikolai paused before double doors of dark polished wood. "Your rooms?" he said, pushing them open. I stepped inside and froze. The suite before me was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and pale blue. A sitting area with elegant furniture faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. Beyond that, I glimpsed a massive canopied bed and what appeared to be a bathroom with a marble tub large enough to swim in. "This can't be real," I murmured. Nikolai moved to stand behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "This is my world, Anna. For the next 2 weeks, it's yours as well." I turned to face him, needing to understand. Why me? Why go to all this trouble for someone who just happened to be passing by when you crashed? His expression softened, and he reached up to trace the line of my jaw with his fingertips. "Do you believe in fate, Anna Sullivan?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know." "I do," he said simply. "I believe some encounters are written in the stars long before they occur. The moment I opened my eyes in that rain and saw your face above mine, I knew." "Knew what?" I whispered. His amber eyes darkened, that I would never let you go. Before I could respond to that terrifying, thrilling declaration, he stepped back. "Rest now. Someone will come for you before dinner." The door closed behind him, and I sank onto a nearby chair, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. What had I agreed to? More importantly, who was Nikolai Volkov, with his mansion and staff and security detail? The obvious answer hovered at the edges of my consciousness, but I pushed it away, because accepting the truth would mean acknowledging that I was now under the roof and the power of a very dangerous man. I explored the suite, finding a closet already filled with clothing in my size. Dresses, blouses, jeans, even lingerie with tags from designers I'd only seen in magazines. The bathroom contained every luxury toiletry imaginable. It was as if Nikolai had prepared for my arrival long before our paths crossed on that rain-slicked street. The thought should have disturbed me more than it did. I showered in the cavernous marble bathroom, letting hot water sluice away the hospital smell that clung to my skin. As the water washed over me, I couldn't help but think of the rain that had soaked me through as I knelt beside Nikolai's broken body. How quickly life could change, from an exhausted nurse heading home to whatever I was now. Wrapped in a plush robe, I returned to the bedroom to find a dress laid out on the bed, a simple but elegant blue sheath that would have cost me a month's salary. A note beside it read simply, "Wear this. N." My first instinct was to rebel, to choose something else from the closet out of principle. But curiosity won out. I slipped on the dress, which fit as if tailored specifically for me, and found myself standing before the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back. At precisely 7:50, a knock came at the door. A young woman with a carefully blank expression stood in the hallway. "Mr. Volkov sent me to escort you to the terrace, Ms. Sullivan." I followed her through the maze of corridors and down another staircase, noticing more security personnel along the way. Their presence was beginning to feel less like protection and more like prison guards. The terrace overlooked expansive gardens that glowed golden in the setting sun. Nikolai stood at the balustrade, his back to me, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He'd changed into dark trousers and a white shirt, open at the collar. Despite the cast on his wrist and the slight favoring of his injured leg, he radiated a predatory elegance. He turned as I approached, and the look that crossed his face made my breath catch. Hunger, appreciation, and something possessive that sent a shiver down my spine. "The blue suits you," he said, his accent thickening slightly. "I knew it would bring out your eyes. Thank you for the dress," I replied, trying to maintain some semblance of professional distance, though I'm still not clear on why I'm here. He gestured to a table set for two, candles already flickering in the twilight. "Join me. We have much to discuss." Dinner was a surreal experience. Course after course of exquisite food appeared and disappeared, served by staff who materialized and vanished like ghosts. Nikolai was an attentive host, ensuring my wine glass never emptied, engaging me in conversation that skillfully revealed nothing about himself while extracting details about my life. "You never mention family," he observed as dessert was served. "Are your parents still living?" I focused on the delicate pastry before me. "My mother died when I was 12, cancer. My father, he couldn't cope afterward. Started drinking. He's in a care facility now, early onset dementia, exacerbated by the alcohol." "And you pay for this facility," Nikolai stated, rather than asked. I nodded, surprised by his perception. "It takes most of what I make. It's why I pick up extra shifts, why I was walking home so late the night I found you." His lips curved slightly at my reference to our first meeting. "A devoted daughter. I admire loyalty, Anna. It's a quality I value above all others." "You speak as if you're constantly evaluating people," I observed. "I am." He leaned forward, the candlelight casting shadows across his face. "In my position, knowing who can be trusted is the difference between life and death." There it was. An opening to ask what exactly his position was, but something in his steady gaze warned me away from that question. Instead, I asked, "And can I be trusted, according to your evaluation?" His smile was slow and predatory. "You're trustworthy, Anna Sullivan, but you're also curious, intelligent, observant. Dangerous qualities in my world." "What is your world, Nikolai?" I finally dared to ask. He considered me for a long moment. "I acquire things, businesses, properties, people. I protect what's mine and eliminate threats. Some call it empire building. Others use less flattering terms. The oblique confession hung in the air between us. I swallowed hard. "You're not just a businessman, are you?" "No more questions tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow, perhaps. After dinner." He suggested a walk through the gardens, but I pleaded exhaustion, a partial truth. My mind was spinning with too many unanswered questions, too many warning signals competing with an inexplicable attraction. Nikolai escorted me back to my suite, his hand once again at the small of my back, his proximity both comforting and disturbing. At my door, he paused, turning me to face him with gentle pressure. "Sleep well, Anna," he murmured, his fingers trailing along my bare arm, raising goosebumps in their wake. "Tomorrow, we begin in earnest." "Begin what?" I asked, my voice embarrassingly breathless. His smile held secrets and promises. "Your education, your transformation." His hand moved to cup my cheek. "You stepped into my world, Moya Zolotaya. Now you must learn its rules." Before I could ask what the foreign words meant, he leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead. a gesture somehow more intimate than a kiss on the lips would have been. "Dream of me," he whispered against my skin, then turned and walked away, his slight limp barely noticeable. Inside my room, I leaned against the closed door, my heart hammering. What had I gotten myself into? More importantly, why wasn't I more afraid? That night, I dreamed of amber eyes and gentle hands that turned to steel, of gilded cages and the seductive whisper of danger. And when I woke, gasping in the pre-dawn darkness, it wasn't fear that left me trembling. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through windows that a silent staff member opened while I was in the bathroom. A breakfast tray waited on the small table in the sitting area, fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee that smelled like heaven. As I sipped the rich brew, I noticed a phone on the tray, not my phone, which had been left behind at the hospital, but a sleek, expensive model I didn't recognize. A note beside it read, "For emergencies. My number is programmed in, N." I picked it up, finding only one contact. Nikolai. No games, no security measures. Either he trusted me implicitly, or, more likely, the phone was being monitored. After breakfast, I explored my suite more thoroughly, discovering a small balcony overlooking the gardens. From this vantage point, I could see the full expanse of the estate, the main house with its multiple wings, outbuildings that might have been guest houses, and at the perimeter, the high stone wall that separated Nikolai's domain from the outside world. It was beautiful, and unmistakably a prison. I was contemplating this reality when a knock came at the door. The same expressionless young woman from the previous evening stood in the hallway. "Mr. Volkov requests your presence in his study, Ms. Sullivan." As I followed her through the labyrinthine corridors, I steeled myself. Today, I would get answers. Today, I would understand exactly what Nikolai Volkov wanted from me, and whether I could survive giving it to him. The study was a cathedral to masculine power. Soaring bookshelves, leather furniture worn to buttery softness, and the scent of old paper mingling with expensive cologne. Afternoon sunlight slanted through tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in golden beams. Nikolai sat behind a massive desk of dark wood, his attention fixed on papers before him. He didn't look up when I entered, though I was certain he was acutely aware of my presence. 2 men stood near the windows, speaking in hushed tones that ceased abruptly when they noticed me. I hesitated at the threshold, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "Come in, Anna," Nikolai said without raising his eyes from his work. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this discussion later." The men exchanged glances before nodding deferentially. As they passed me, I caught fragments of their whispered conversation. Shipment and harbor, and something that sounded like competition. Neither met my gaze. When the heavy door closed behind them, Nikolai finally looked up. The sunlight caught the amber of his eyes, turning them almost gold. Something in his expression shifted when he saw me, a softening around the edges of his usual intensity. "You slept well?" he asked, rising from his chair with that fluid grace that belied his injuries. "Well enough," I replied, remaining near the door. "Though I have questions. I'm sure you do." He moved around the desk, his limp barely perceptible now. "But first, come here." It wasn't a request. I found myself crossing the room toward him, drawn by some invisible force. When I reached him, he cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones in a touch so gentle it made my breath catch. "I had them bring you to me first thing this morning, but you were still sleeping," he said, his voice low. "You looked peaceful. I couldn't bear to wake you." The thought of him watching me sleep should have disturbed me. Instead, I felt a treacherous warmth spread through my chest. "Nikolai," I began, struggling to maintain my focus. "I need to understand what's happening here. Who you are, what you want from me." He sighed, dropping his hands from my face. "Walk with me," he said, gesturing toward a door that led to a private garden I hadn't noticed before. "My leg needs the exercise, and this conversation requires fresh air." The garden was a secluded oasis, surrounded by high hedges that ensured complete privacy. A stone path wound between meticulously pruned roses and other flowers I couldn't name. At its center stood a small pavilion with comfortable seating. We walked in silence for several minutes, his hand occasionally brushing mine in a way that seemed both deliberate and casual. Finally, We reached the pavilion, and he gestured for me to sit. "You want answers?" he said, lowering himself beside me. "Ask your questions, Anna. I'll answer what I can." I took a deep breath. "Who are you? Really?" His lips curved in that ghost of a smile. "Nikolai Volkov, owner of various legitimate businesses, shipping, real estate, nightclubs, and yes, some enterprises that operate in grayer areas. You're in the Mafia," I said bluntly. He didn't flinch at the accusation. "That term is somewhat outdated. I prefer to think of myself as the head of an organization that provides services where traditional channels fail. Illegal services, sometimes," he conceded, "but also protection for those who cannot turn to the police, opportunities for immigrants who would otherwise be exploited, justice where the law fails." His eyes held mine. "Not everything is black and white, Anna." "And the men who were killed in your territory last month? The ones the news said were executed gangland style? Was that your idea of justice?" Something cold flickered across his features. "You've been researching me. I overheard your name from the staff. I'm not stupid." The coldness vanished, replaced by something like approval. "No, you're not. That's part of why I find you so fascinating." He leaned closer. "Those men were trafficking young girls. The authorities were compromised. They received the ending they deserved." The matter-of-fact way he spoke of execution should have horrified me. But some small, dark part of me whispered that perhaps some monsters deserved to be destroyed by bigger monsters. "Why am I here, Nikolai?" He reached for my hand, his fingers entwining with mine. "Because you saved my life when others would have let me die. Because you look at me and see the man, not the monster." His grip tightened. "Because I haven't been able to get you out of my head since I opened my eyes in that rain and saw your face above mine. I was just being a decent human being. Anyone would have stopped." "No," he said with surprising vehemence. "They wouldn't. Do you know how many people must have driven past, seen the accident, and decided it wasn't their problem? How many called 911 perhaps, but didn't stop? You didn't just stop, Anna. You gave me your coat. You shielded me with your body. You stayed with me." His eyes burned into mine. That kind of selflessness is rare. Precious. I couldn't argue with his assessment of human nature. I'd seen too much in my years as a nurse. How quickly people turned away from others' suffering. "So what happens now?" I asked. "You keep me here like a pet? A prisoner?" Anger flashed in his eyes. "Is that what you think? That I would cage you? What else am I supposed to think?" I gestured around us. "The security, the isolation, the way your staff watches me. It's a beautiful prison, but still a prison." He released my hand abruptly. "The security is for your protection. Do you understand what would happen if my enemies discovered I had feelings for someone? You would become a target." His voice hardened. "And I will not lose you to my past mistakes." Feelings. The word hung between us, fraught with implication. "I never asked for your protection," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "Yet you need it." He stood, pacing the small pavilion. "3 of my rivals know I was injured. They're circling like sharks, testing boundaries, looking for weakness. I've already eliminated one threat, but the others are more cautious." He stopped, fixing me with that intense gaze. "If they knew about you, they would use you to get to me, and I would burn this world to ashes before I let that happen." The fervor in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Fear mingled with something more primal, more dangerous. "So, I'm a liability to you," I concluded. "No." He knelt before me, taking both my hands in his. "You are the only thing in this life that has ever made me question my path. The only person who has made me want something beyond power and vengeance. You don't even know me," I whispered. "I know enough," he said fiercely. "I know you work yourself to exhaustion, caring for strangers. I know you sacrifice your own comfort to pay for your father's care. I know that despite seeing the worst of humanity in that emergency room, you still believe people can be saved." His grip tightened. "And I know that when you look at me, part of you sees something worth saving too." I couldn't speak, because he was right. Beneath the fear and confusion, there was something else. An attraction that went beyond his physical beauty. A pull toward the wounded soul I glimpsed beneath the dangerous exterior. "What do you want from me?" I asked again, my voice barely audible. His expression softened. 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks to show you my world, to show you who I am beyond the rumors and headlines. After that, if you still wish to leave, I will let you go. His thumb traced circles on my wrist. But I think you'll stay, Anna Sullivan, because you feel it too, this connection between us. Before I could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. Nikolai rose smoothly to his feet as one of his security detail appeared at the garden entrance. "Sir, forgive the interruption. There's a situation that requires your attention." Nikolai's expression hardened instantly, the vulnerable man vanishing behind a mask of cold authority. "I'll be right there." He turned back to me. "Return to the house, Anna. We'll continue our conversation at dinner." He left without another word, following his security man back through the study. I remained in the pavilion, my thoughts in turmoil. 2 weeks to decide whether to step fully into Nikolai Volkov's dangerous world or return to my own. But even as I contemplated the choice, I knew my world had already shifted on its axis, the moment those amber eyes had locked on mine in the rain. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Mornings, I was largely left to my own devices. I explored the extensive grounds, always aware of the security personnel watching from a discreet distance. I discovered a library that rivaled public institutions, a conservatory filled with rare plants, and an indoor pool housed in what looked like a Roman bathhouse. Afternoons often found me in Nikolai's company. Despite his injuries, he maintained a punishing schedule, taking calls and meetings even as doctors came and went. Yet he always made time for me, showing me his art collection, teaching me chess in the library, telling me stories of his childhood in Russia before his family immigrated, carefully edited stories, I was sure, that omitted the darker elements of his past. And always, there were the touches. His hand at the small of my back, his fingers brushing mine when he passed me a chess piece, his lips grazing my knuckles in an old-world gesture when we parted. Each contact sent electricity skittering across my skin, building a tension that grew with each passing day. Evenings were the most dangerous. We dined together, sometimes on the terrace, sometimes in a formal dining room that could have seated 30, but was set only for 2. The conversations grew deeper, more personal. I told him about my mother's death, about nursing my father through the worst of his alcoholism before his mind began to slip away. He spoke of losing his parents in what he called a business disagreement when he was 19, of taking over the family enterprises and expanding them beyond what his father had ever imagined. Neither of us explicitly mentioned the illegal aspects of those enterprises, but they hung in the air between us, acknowledged but unspoken. On the 5th night, as we shared dessert on the moonlit terrace, Nikolai's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "Excuse me," he said, rising from the table. "I need to take this." He moved to the balustrade, his back to me as he spoke in rapid Russian. Even without understanding the words, I could hear the steel in his voice, see the tension in his shoulders. When he ended the call, he remained with his back to me for several long moments, as if composing himself. "Is everything all right?" I asked. He turned, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. A predatory stillness, eyes flat and hard as amber stones. "A minor irritation," he said, his voice too casual. "Nothing for you to worry about." But that night, I heard shouting from somewhere in the house. Angry voices in Russian, followed by a crash and silence. I lay awake, listening to the distant sounds of cars arriving and departing, of muffled orders being given. When I finally drifted to sleep near dawn, my dreams were filled with shadowy figures and the metallic scent of blood. The next morning, Nikolai was nowhere to be found. The young woman who brought my breakfast informed me that he had been called away on business but would return by evening. Left to my own devices, I decided to explore parts of the house I hadn't yet seen. Most doors were unlocked, revealing guest bedrooms, sitting rooms, and various spaces for entertainment. But when I reached the west wing, I found my path blocked by one of Nikolai's security men. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, his expression impassive. "This area is restricted." "On whose orders?" I challenged, though I knew the answer. "Mr. Volkov's." I returned to my suite, frustration simmering beneath my skin. For all Nikolai's talk of showing me his world, he was still keeping parts of it carefully hidden. The pretense of freedom within these walls was just that, a pretense. That evening, I was informed that Nikolai had been further delayed. I dined alone in my room, my thoughts circling like predators. What had happened the night before? What was he hiding in the West Wing? And most troubling of all, why did I care so much? Because somewhere between the rainy street and this gilded cage, I had begun to fall for the monster with the amber eyes. On the 7th day, I woke to find a small box beside my bed, tied with a silk ribbon. Inside was an exquisite gold bracelet set with tiny diamonds that caught the morning light. The note beneath it read, "For last night's absence, wear this tonight." And my first instinct was to refuse the gift. It represented everything problematic about this arrangement. The idea that my time and feelings could be bought. But when Nikolai appeared at my door that evening, his eyes immediately went to my wrist, where the bracelet glittered. The satisfaction in his smile made my heart race. "You're angry with me," he said as we walked to dinner, his hand at its customary place on my lower back. "I'm confused," I corrected. "You disappear for a day and a half, then try to smooth it over with expensive jewelry. What am I supposed to think, Nikolai?" He guided me to the dining room, waiting until we were seated and the staff had withdrawn before answering. "There was a situation that required my personal attention. It's been resolved." "A situation," I repeated. "Like the men who were killed last month?" His expression hardened. "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to, Anna." "Maybe I do want the answers. Maybe I'm tired of half-truths and evasions." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You think you want the truth, the full, unvarnished reality of what I am, what I do?" He leaned forward. "The night before last, I ordered the execution of 3 men who tried to move product through my territory after I explicitly denied them permission. I watched as they begged for their lives, and I felt nothing." His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Is that the truth you wanted?" I should have been horrified. I should have recoiled from him, demanded to be taken home immediately. Instead, I met his gaze steadily. "Yes," I said quietly. "That's exactly what I wanted. No more pretty illusions, no more sanitized versions. If you want me to choose your world, Nikolai, I need to see all of it, the darkness as well as the light." For a moment, he looked genuinely startled. Then his expression shifted to something like wonder. "You continue to surprise me, Anna Sullivan," he murmured. "Is that a good thing?" His smile was slow and predatory. "It's a dangerous thing, for both of us." After that night, something changed between us. The careful boundaries Nikolai had established began to dissolve. He no longer shielded me from the reality of his business, taking calls in my presence, allowing me to overhear conversations that would have made my blood run cold just days before. It was as if my acceptance of his darkness had unlocked a door between us. On the morning of the 9th day, I woke to find Nikolai sitting in a chair beside my bed, watching me sleep. I should have been startled, even frightened, but instead, a warm languidness spread through my limbs. "How long have you been there?" I asked, my voice still husky with sleep. "Not long." He reached out to brush a strand of hair from my face. "I had a dream about you. When I woke, I needed to see you." "What was the dream?" Something haunted passed across his features. "You were gone. I searched everywhere, but I couldn't find you." His hand lingered at my cheek. "When I woke, the panic was overwhelming. I had to make sure." "I'm here," I whispered, covering his hand with mine. His amber eyes darkened. "For how long, Anna? Our 2 weeks is nearly half over." The reminder sent a pang through my chest. Despite everything, the danger, the violence that surrounded him, the knowledge of what he was, the thought of leaving Nikolai's world had become increasingly painful. "I don't know," I admitted. He nodded once, accepting my honesty if not the answer he wanted. "Get dressed. I want to show you something today." An hour later, we were in one of his sleek black cars, driving into the city. 2 other vehicles followed at a discreet distance, more of Nikolai's ever-present security. "Where are we going?" I asked as skyscrapers began to replace countryside. To see another side of my business, he replied, his hand finding mine on the seat between us. One I think you'll approve of more than some of my other ventures. We pulled up outside an unassuming building in what appeared to be a recently gentrified neighborhood. Unlike Nikolai's mansion, there were no obvious security measures, no armed men standing guard, just a simple sign above the door. New Beginning Center. Inside, the space was bright and welcoming. Comfortable furniture, artwork on the walls, the sound of children's laughter echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. A woman behind a reception desk looked up as we entered, her eyes widening at the sight of Nikolai. "Mr. Volkov, we weren't expecting you today," she exclaimed, rising quickly. "An impromptu visit, Marina," he replied, his hand possessively at the small of my back. "I wanted to show Anna our work here." Marina's curious gaze flickered to me. "Of course. Everyone will be so pleased to see you." As she led us through the building, Nikolai leaned close to my ear. "This is a shelter and support center for immigrants, particularly those who have escaped trafficking or other exploitation. We provide housing, legal aid, education, childcare, job training." "We?" I asked, surprised. His lips curved in that ghost of a smile. "I fund it entirely. It was my mother's dream before she died, to create a place where people like us, who came to this country with nothing, could find safety and opportunity." Before I could respond, we entered a large, sunny room where about 15 women of various ages sat at tables, some working on computers, others engaged in what appeared to be craft activities. Several young children played in a corner under the watchful eye of a caregiver. When they saw Nikolai, several of the women called out greetings in various languages. To my astonishment, he responded in kind to each of them, moving through the room with a warmth and ease I'd never seen in him before. He introduced me simply as Anna, who is very special to me, a description that sent heat blooming across my skin. For the next 2 hours, I watched as Nikolai checked on the progress of various women in the program, kneeling to speak with children at their level, consulting with staff about needed resources. This was a side of him I hadn't glimpsed before, the ruthless crime boss transformed into a compassionate benefactor. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked quietly as we prepared to leave. Nikolai's expression was serious. "Because I wanted you to see that not everything I do casts shadows. Some of it brings light." He took my hand. "I am what circumstances have made me, Anna. But I try to balance the scales where I can." In the car, I struggled to reconcile this new information with what I already knew about him. "The women in there looked at you like you're their savior." "For some of them I am," he said matter-of-factly. "Many were being trafficked by the same men I've eliminated over the years. The police wouldn't or couldn't help them. I could." "So you're a vigilante now, taking out bad guys to protect the innocent?" He laughed, though there was little humor in it. "Don't romanticize me, Anna. I'm no hero. Some of the men I've killed deserved it, yes. Others were simply obstacles to my objectives. I do what is necessary to protect what's mine and to expand my territory." His hand found mine again. "But I don't target the vulnerable. I don't deal in human trafficking. I don't sell to children. I have lines I won't cross, and that makes it better. It makes it what it is," he said simply. "My world isn't black and white, Anna. It exists in shades of gray. I needed you to see that before you make your decision." The remainder of the drive passed in thoughtful silence. Back at the mansion, Nikolai was immediately pulled into some urgent business matter, leaving me to my conflicted thoughts. That evening, we dined on the terrace again. Nikolai seemed distracted, checking his phone more frequently than usual. When he received a particular message, his expression darkened. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He hesitated, then set down his phone. "One of my shipments was intercepted. It appears someone may have provided information to the authorities. The implications were clear even to me." "You think someone betrayed you?" "Yes." His voice was cold as winter. "And betrayal has consequences in my world." A chill ran down my spine. This was the reminder I needed. Beneath the charm, beneath the unexpected compassion I'd witnessed today, Nikolai Volkov was still a man who ordered executions as casually as others ordered coffee. "What will you do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His eyes met mine, and for once, he didn't soften his expression. What is necessary? Later that night, I stood on my balcony, watching moonlight silver the gardens below. The evening's conversation had shaken me from the pleasant fantasy I'd been building, that somehow I could separate the parts of Nikolai I was falling for from the violence that was intrinsic to his existence. A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Nikolai stood there, his usual composure fractured by something raw and desperate. "I couldn't sleep," he said simply. I stepped aside to let him in. He moved to the center of the room, then turned to face me, his expression torn between desire and restraint. "I keep thinking about what happens when our 2 weeks are over," he said, his accent thickening with emotion. "The thought of you leaving, of returning to your old life as if none of this happened. It's driving me mad, Anna." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm night. "I don't know what to tell you, Nikolai. Your world terrifies me." "Not me?" he asked, moving closer. "Am I what terrifies you?" I shook my head slowly. "That's the problem. You should terrify me. What you've done, what you're capable of doing. I should be running as far and as fast as I can." I looked up at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who had upended my existence. "But when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I ever have before." Something fierce and possessive flared in his eyes. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame my face. "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay with me, Anna. Let me give you everything, a life beyond anything you've imagined." "In exchange for what?" I challenged, even as I leaned into his touch. "My freedom? My conscience? My soul?" His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. "I would never cage you. If you choose to stay, it will be as my equal, not my possession." "Equal?" I laughed softly. "How can we be equals when you hold all the power?" Something vulnerable flickered across his features. "You have more power than you know, Anna Sullivan. From the moment I opened my eyes in that rain and saw you leaning over me, you've held my heart in your hands." Before I could respond, his lips found mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something fiercer, more demanding. I should have pushed him away. Instead, my arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer as years of carefully maintained control crumbled to ash. His hands slid down my body, leaving trails of heat in their wake. When he lifted me, I wrapped my legs around his waist, gasping as he carried me to the bed and followed me down onto the mattress. His weight above me should have felt confining. Instead, it felt like an anchor in a storm. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against my throat, his voice rough with restraint. "If this isn't what you want, tell me now, and I'll go." In answer, I pulled his mouth back to mine, surrendering to the hunger that had been building between us since that first moment on the rain-slicked street. As clothing gave way to skin against skin, as whispered endearments in English and Russian filled the darkness, I knew I was crossing a line from which there would be no return. I woke the next morning to find Nikolai watching me again, his amber eyes soft with something that looked dangerously like love. He traced patterns on my bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. I considered the question seriously. "No," I finally said. "But this doesn't solve anything, Nikolai. It only complicates everything." He smiled, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "Life is complicated, moya zolotaya. But some complications are worth it." The next 3 days passed in a haze of newfound intimacy. Nikolai rearranged his schedule to spend more time with me, though he still attended to business matters that he now discussed more openly in my presence. At night, he came to my room, or I to his, a sprawling suite even more luxurious than mine, and we lost ourselves in each other until dawn. But beneath the surface bliss, tension was building. The matter of the betrayed shipment remained unresolved, and I could see it weighing on Nikolai. His phone calls became more frequent, his expression harder when he thought I wasn't looking. Twice I overheard him giving orders in Russian that, even without understanding the words, chilled me with their cold fury. On the 13th day, our penultimate day together, according to our original agreement, everything shattered. I was reading in the library when I heard shouting from Nikolai's study. Drawn by concern, I moved to the door connecting the two rooms, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see Nikolai and two of his security men. Between them knelt a man I recognized as one of Nikolai's drivers, his face bloody and swollen. "You've worked for me for 5 years, Dmitri," Nikolai was saying, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I treated you well, paid you generously, protected your family, and this is how you repay me? Please," the man sobbed. "It was only the one time. They threatened my son, and you didn't come to me?" Nikolai's voice rose for the first time. "I would have protected your boy. Instead, you went to the feds, gave them information that cost me millions, that put my entire operation at risk. I'm sorry," Dmitri wept. "Please, Nikolai, for my children. Your children will be taken care of," Nikolai cut him off. "I promised you that when you came to work for me, and unlike you, I keep my promises." He turned to one of the security men. "Take him to the warehouse, make it quick and clean, then arrange for his wife to receive the usual compensation package for families." Horror froze me in place. I knew what Nikolai was, knew what he was capable of. But to witness it firsthand, to hear him order a man's execution with the same tone he might use to order lunch, made it suddenly, terribly real. I must have made a sound, because Nikolai's head snapped toward the door. Our eyes met through the gap, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not shame, but regret that I had seen this side of him. I fled back to my suite, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the reality I had been trying to ignore, the darkness I'd been willing to overlook because of how he made me feel. A man was going to die, a man with children, because Nikolai Volkov had decreed it. I was still sitting on the edge of my bed, trembling, when he entered without knocking. He stood just inside the doorway, his posture rigid. "You saw," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of distress. "This is my world, Anna. I've never pretended otherwise. He has children," I whispered. "And I will ensure they want for nothing. Their education, their futures, all provided for. While they grow up without a father." His expression hardened. "A father who betrayed the organization that employed him, who put everyone at risk, including you." He moved closer. "If word gets out that betrayal goes unpunished, how long before someone else decides to test me? How long before they target what I care about most?" His gaze burned into mine. "How long before they come for you?" I stood, anger finally breaking through the shock. "Don't you dare use me as justification for murder." "It's not murder," he said coldly. "It's justice by my code. It's protection of what's mine." "I'm not yours," I shouted. "I'm not one of your possessions to be protected and controlled." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Aren't you?" He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand wrapping around the back of my neck, not painfully, but with unmistakable possession. "You gave yourself to me these past 4 nights. You took what I offered. You can't pretend you don't understand what that means in my world." I wrenched away from him. "I need to leave. Now. Today." Pain replaced the anger in his expression. "Anna." "No," I cut him off. "This was a fantasy, Nikolai. A beautiful, dangerous fantasy that I let myself believe in because you made me feel things I've never felt before. But I can't do this. I can't live in a world where people are executed for making mistakes." "He betrayed me," Nikolai said, his voice suddenly weary. "In my world, that has only one consequence. Then I don't want to be part of your world." The words hurt to say, but I forced them out. "Please, have your driver take me home. Today." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room. An hour later, the expressionless young woman informed me that a car would be ready to take me back to the city in 30 minutes. I packed nothing. Not the expensive clothes, not the jewelry Nikolai had given me. I wanted no souvenirs of this interlude that had nearly cost me my soul. I changed back into the hospital scrubs I'd been given after my original clothes were soaked through in the rain that night with Nikolai, the only items that were truly mine. As I descended the grand staircase for the last time, I half expected, half hoped, that Nikolai would appear to try once more to convince me to stay. But the entrance hall was empty, save for one of his security men, who escorted me to the waiting car without a word. It was only as the car pulled away, as the mansion receded in the distance, that I allowed the tears to fall. Because despite everything, despite what I had witnessed and what I knew him to be, leaving Nikolai Volkov felt like tearing out a part of myself I hadn't known existed until he claimed it. The city looked foreign through the window of the sleek black car. The same streets I had walked countless times now transformed into something alien and hostile. Or perhaps it was I who had changed, my perception altered by 2 weeks in Nikolai's world of luxury and danger. We pulled up to my apartment building, its shabby exterior even more depressing than I remembered. The security man who had driven me opened my door without a word. As I stepped out, he handed me a small package. "Mr. Volkov instructed me to give you this," he said, his face expressionless. I almost refused it, but something in the man's stoic demeanor suggested that would be unwise. I took the package and watched as he returned to the car and drove away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk of my old life. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Small, cluttered, but mine. The familiarity should have been comforting after the opulence of Nikolai's mansion. Instead, it felt like a stranger's space, as if I were visiting a life I'd once known but no longer recognized. I sat on my lumpy couch, turning the package over in my hands. Finally, I unwrapped it to find a phone. Not the one Nikolai had given me at the mansion, but a new one. And a small velvet box. Inside the box was a delicate gold chain with a single pendant, a small key crafted from what appeared to be white gold, inset with tiny diamonds. A note was folded beneath it in Nikolai's bold handwriting. "Anna, the phone is secure and untraceable. My number is the only one programmed in it. The key is symbolic. It opens nothing except perhaps the cage you believe I've built around you. Keep them both. Use neither. Destroy them. The choice is yours, as it has always been. Yours always, Nikolai." I closed the box with trembling fingers and set it aside, tears burning behind my eyes. Even now he was still playing games, still trying to maintain control. I should throw both items away, sever all connections to the dangerous world I'd briefly inhabited. Instead, I placed the box and phone in my bedside drawer and tried to remember how to exist in my former life. The next day, I returned to the hospital. The administrators seemed surprised to see me. Apparently, Nikolai's generous compensation for my leave of absence had been substantial enough that no one had expected me back so soon, if at all. My colleagues welcomed me with curious glances and carefully phrased questions about my private nursing assignment that I deflected as best I could. I threw myself back into work with a fervor that bordered on obsession, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for the most difficult cases, anything to keep my mind occupied and away from thoughts of amber eyes and gentle hands that could order a man's death without hesitation. At night, alone in my apartment, it was harder to maintain the pretense. I would find myself reaching for the drawer that held Nikolai's gifts, stopping just short of opening it. I would stare at my phone, my regular phone, half expecting it to ring with his number, though I knew it wouldn't. Nikolai Volkov was too proud to chase after a woman who had rejected his world. A week passed, then 2. Life settled into a routine that felt like sleepwalking. I worked. I came home. I slept. Sometimes I ate. The colors seemed duller, the sounds muted, as if part of me had remained behind in that mansion with its gardens and secrets, and the man who had awoken something in me I couldn't quite extinguish. It was nearly a month after my return when the first incident occurred. I was walking home from a late shift, the streets quiet and mostly deserted, when I sensed rather than saw someone following me. A prickle of awareness raised the hair on the back of my neck. I quickened my pace, clutching my keys between my fingers as a makeshift weapon. The footsteps behind me sped up as well. Just as panic began to rise in my throat, a car screeched to a halt beside me. A nondescript sedan, not one of Nikolai's sleek black vehicles. The back door flew open. "Get in, nurse," a voice commanded. "We need to have a conversation about your boyfriend." My blood turned to ice. I ran, darting down an alley I knew had an exit on the next street. Behind me, I heard shouts and the sound of pursuit. I was halfway down the alley when a second man stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking my path. "Don't make this difficult," he said, reaching for me. I screamed and lashed out with my keys, catching him across the cheek. He cursed, his hand flying to his face, then lunged toward me with rage in his eyes. I braced for impact, but it never came. Instead, the night erupted in controlled violence. Two figures materialized from the shadows, moving with practiced efficiency. My attacker was on the ground in seconds, unmoving. The sound of more fighting came from the alley entrance. Then silence. One of my rescuers turned toward me, his face impassive in the dim light. I recognized him immediately, one of Nikolai's security detail. "Are you hurt, Ms. Sullivan?" he asked formally. I shook my head, trembling. Have you been following me, Mr. Volkov assigned us to your protection the day you left," he said matter-of-factly. "We've been monitoring your movements from a distance. Tonight we observed these men tracking you and intervened when their intentions became clear." The other security man joined us, speaking rapidly into a phone in Russian. When he finished, he addressed his colleague. "The boss wants us to bring her in." Fear and something else, something treacherously like hope, fluttered in my chest. "I'm not going anywhere," I protested. "I have a life here, a job." "You have a target on your back," the first man cut me off bluntly. "These men work for the Petrov organization. They've learned of your connection to Mr. Volkov and sought to use you as leverage. There will be others." I thought of my small apartment with its flimsy locks, of the open hospital where I worked, surrounded by the public. How long before they tried again? How many innocent people might be caught in the crossfire? "Fine," I said finally. "Take me to him." The drive to Nikolai's mansion passed in tense silence. My thoughts raced. Was this a genuine threat, or an elaborate ploy to bring me back into Nikolai's orbit? The calculated violence I had witnessed in the alley suggested the former, but I couldn't dismiss the possibility of manipulation. When we arrived, the house was ablaze with lights, security personnel patrolling the grounds in greater numbers than I remembered. I was escorted directly to Nikolai's study, where he stood by the window, his back to the door, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned when I entered, and the sight of him hit me with physical force. The sharp angles of his face, the intensity of those amber eyes, the coiled power in his stance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You're unharmed?" he asked finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Yes," I replied. "Your men were efficient. Good." He set down his glass and moved closer, his gaze sweeping over me as if confirming for himself that I was whole. "They were under orders to intercede only if you were in imminent danger. Otherwise, to remain unseen." "You've had men following me for a month," I said, anger building. "Watching me, reporting back to you. So much for respecting my choice to leave." His expression hardened. "Your choice to leave did not negate my responsibility to protect you. The moment you entered my life, you became a potential target. Tonight proved that concern justified. Or it proved that your enemies knew you were having me watched," I countered. "Maybe they never would have connected me to you if you'd truly let me go, a risk I was unwilling to take." He moved to a sideboard, pouring another glass of what I now saw was whiskey. "Drink this. You're still in shock." I took the glass more to have something to do with my hands than from any desire for alcohol. "What happens now? Those men tonight. Will there be others?" Nikolai's expression was grim. "Yes. Petrov has lost too much territory to me in recent months. He's desperate for leverage." His eyes met mine. "And now he knows my greatest vulnerability." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I took a swallow of whiskey, welcoming the burn in my throat. "So what's the solution? I can't live with bodyguards shadowing my every move. I can't work in a hospital knowing patients might be put at risk because of me." "Stay here," he said simply, "where I can ensure your safety." I laughed bitterly. Back in the gilded cage, anger flashed in his eyes. "It was never a cage, Anna. It was the only place I could keep you safe while still giving you freedom within its walls." "Freedom?" I echoed incredulously. "You call being watched by your staff, being limited to areas you deemed appropriate, being a bird in a beautiful aviary freedom? I call loving someone enough to compromise my own nature freedom." He shot back. Do you think it was easy for me to let you walk back into danger? To respect your decision when every instinct I have demanded I lock you away, where no one could ever harm you? He moved toward me, his eyes blazing. I have never given anyone the power to hurt me the way you can, Anna Sullivan. And I have never shown such restraint in protecting what is mine. The word love echoed in my mind, stunning me to silence. Nikolai took advantage of my momentary speechlessness to press on. Stay, he said again, softer now. Not as my prisoner, but as my partner. Help me build something better than what I inherited. Challenge me when I go too far. Be my conscience when mine fails me. His hand reached for mine, fingers entwining. Be the light to my darkness. I stared at our joined hands. And Dmitri? The driver you ordered executed? Something like regret passed across Nikolai's features, a decision I cannot undo, but one that I've reflected on in your absence. He hesitated. I've made changes to how betrayal is handled. Second chances for minor infractions. Exile rather than execution for more serious ones, except in cases of violence against family or direct threats to leadership. I looked up at him, surprised. Why? Because I saw my world through your eyes that day, he said simply. And I did not like the reflection. The admission stunned me. This man who ruled his domain with absolute authority was acknowledging that I had changed his perspective. It was as close to transformation as someone like Nikolai Volkov could come. I'm still who I am, Anna, he continued, his grip on my hand tightening. I still rule territories others would kill to control. I still eliminate threats. I still operate outside the law. His other hand came up to cup my cheek, but I can be better, with you beside me. I can find balance between the man I've become and the man you believe I could be. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch despite myself. And what about my life, my career? Am I supposed to give up everything I've worked for? No, he said immediately. There's a private clinic associated with the immigrant center. They need a head nurse, someone with emergency experience, someone with compassion for the vulnerable. The position is yours if you want it, regardless of your decision about us. I opened my eyes, studying him. You arranged this before tonight. He didn't deny it. I wanted you to have options, real choices, not ultimatums. And if I choose to stay with you, something fierce and possessive flared in his gaze, then I will give you everything, Anna, my protection, my loyalty, my empire. His voice dropped to a whisper, my heart, which has belonged to you since the moment you saved my life. I took a deep breath, weighing my options with a clarity I hadn't possessed a month ago. I could return to my apartment, live in fear, eventually be forced to relocate and start over elsewhere, always looking over my shoulder. Or I could accept the protection Nikolai offered, and with it, the man himself, with all his darkness and light. If I stay, I said slowly, there will be conditions. A smile tugged at his lips. I expected nothing less. I need honesty, complete transparency about your business. No more locked doors or forbidden areas. He nodded once. Done. I need autonomy, freedom to come and go as I please, with security, but without constant supervision. Within reason, when there are no active threats, he countered. I need to know that any changes you've made to how your organization operates aren't just for show, that you're genuinely committed to finding less violent solutions when possible. His expression grew serious. I cannot promise perfection, Anna, but I can promise progress. Evolution, rather than revolution. I studied him, this man who had upended my world, who both terrified and thrilled me. Last condition, I said quietly. I need to know that what you feel for me is real, that this isn't about possession or control, or the thrill of the chase. Nikolai's eyes softened in a way I'd seen only in our most intimate moments. He released my hand to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. Unlike the one he'd sent with me a month ago, this one was dark blue velvet. I've had this since the day after you left, he said, opening it to reveal a ring set with a diamond that caught the light like a captured star. I was going to find a way to ask you, even if it took years to earn back your trust. My breath caught in my throat. Nikolai, I don't just want you in my bed, or under my roof, or wearing my gifts, he continued. I want you by my side, As my wife, my equal. The one person in this world I trust completely. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. I love you, Anna Sullivan, with a depth that terrifies even me. Time seemed to suspend as I stood at the crossroads of two lives, the safe, ordinary existence I'd always known, and the dangerous, exhilarating future Nikolai offered. In that moment of perfect clarity, I realized there was only one choice I could live with. I held out my left hand. Ask me properly, I said, my voice steady despite the thundering of my heart. Surprise flashed across his face, followed by a joy so raw it transformed his features. He lowered himself to one knee, still holding my hand in his. Anna Sullivan, he said, his accent thickening with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you stand beside me as my partner, my conscience, my heart? Will you help me build something worthy of the future we could have together? I looked down at this powerful, dangerous, complex man, a man capable of both terrible violence and surprising tenderness, and knew that despite everything, or perhaps because of it, he was mine as completely as I was his. Yes, I whispered, watching as he slid the ring onto my finger. Yes, I will marry you, Nikolai Volkov. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, pulling me against him with an intensity that took my breath away. His lips found mine in a kiss that felt like coming home and embarking on a dangerous adventure all at once. When we finally broke apart, his amber eyes glowed with triumphant possession. Mine, he murmured, his fingers threading through my hair. Yours, I agreed, then added with a smile that held both promise and warning. And you're mine. Don't forget that part. His answering smile was predatory and tender all at once. I wouldn't dare, Moya Zolotaya. I wouldn't dare. 6 months later, we were married in a private ceremony on the terrace where we had shared our first dinner. The immigrant center had become my passion, growing under my direction into a comprehensive healthcare facility for the underserved. Nikolai's business continued to evolve, moving increasingly toward legitimate enterprises, while maintaining the core protection rackets that were his family's legacy. There were still dangerous moments, still nights when Nikolai returned with shadows in his eyes and blood on his hands. There were still arguments about lines that shouldn't be crossed, about mercy versus justice, about the balance between protection and freedom. But there was also love, fierce, uncompromising love, that had forged something new from the collision of our worlds. I had become stronger, more assertive, less naive. He had become more thoughtful, more measured, more willing to consider alternatives to violence. Neither of us was perfect. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. As real as the key pendant I still wore beside my wedding ring, reminding us both that I had chosen this life, this man, with my eyes wide open. Sometimes, in quiet moments when Nikolai thought I wasn't looking, I would catch him watching me with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe I had stayed. In those moments, I would think back to that rainy night on the street, when fate had placed his broken body in my path. I had saved his life that night. But in the end, he had given me a life I never could have imagined. Dangerous and beautiful, challenging and rewarding, walking the razor's edge between darkness and light. 1 year to the day after our first meeting, we returned to the spot where his motorcycle had crashed. The street looked ordinary in the sunshine, no trace remaining of the accident that had changed our lives forever. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? I asked, standing at the exact spot where I had found him. If I had walked a different route that night? If the rain had stopped earlier and I'd already been home? Nikolai's arm tightened around my waist. No, he said simply, because it could not have been any other way. You were meant to find me, Anna. You were meant to save me, in every way a person can be saved. He turned me to face him, his amber eyes reflecting the sunlight. 1 year ago, I was broken on this pavement. Today, I stand here whole, with the woman who pieced me back together. I didn't piece you together, I protested. You were already who you were. No, he said softly. You showed me who I could be. You gave me a reason to be more than just a powerful man. You gave me a reason to be a better one. As we walked back to the waiting car, his hand possessively at the small of my back where it had rested since that first day, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. From a chance encounter in the rain to a shared life that balanced precariously between two worlds, the underworld Nikolai ruled and the healing one I inhabited. There was no guarantee our unusual marriage would survive the challenges that surely lay ahead. The violence inherent in Nikolai's business, the ethical compromises I still struggled with daily, the enemies who would never stop looking for weaknesses to exploit. But as I glanced at the man beside me, the dangerous, complicated man who had claimed my heart as decisively as I had claimed his, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never regret stopping that rainy night. I would never regret kneeling beside a stranger's broken body. I would never regret saving the man who would one day become my husband, my partner, my fate. Because in saving Nikolai Volkov, I had ultimately saved myself, from an ordinary life half-lived, from safety without passion, from comfort without challenge. "What are you thinking about?" Nikolai asked as we settled into the back seat of the car, his fingers entwining with mine. I smiled, meeting those amber eyes that had captivated me from the first moment they opened in the rain. "I'm thinking that some accidents are actually destiny in disguise." His answering smile was both tender and predatory, the perfect embodiment of the contradictions that made him who he was. "Then I'm grateful for the rain, the slick road, and the guardrail that brought you to me, Moya Zolotaya." As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the ordinary street where our extraordinary story had begun, Nikolai pulled me close and pressed his lips to my temple. "To fate," he murmured against my skin. "To fate," I agreed, turning to meet his kiss fully, "and to the courage to embrace it."